The Galactic Union had always considered humanity an oddity, amusing to study, decent for trade, but ultimately irrelevant. They judged our species through the filter of their own pride, primitive, reckless, unpredictable. To them, we were a side note in the annals of galactic history, something to be monitored, occasionally guided, and eventually absorbed. What they never grasped was simple. Earth wasn't calm because we lacked strength. Earth was calm because we restrained it. We issued warnings, years of them. Warnings disguised as diplomacy, hidden in research forums, wrapped in polite phrases laced with steel. We told them, "You don't want us provoked. We are not like the others." They laughed. They always laughed. The Union enforced its harmony doctrine like Holy Scripture, demanding absolute obedience. The principle was conflict suppression. But in practice, it erased identity. Colonies disarmed, cultures gutted, records rewritten to fit their narrative. Most species bent quietly, thankful to belong to the order. Earth refused. We held our weapons. We shielded our AI cores. We hid our true arsenals so deep they became myth even among our own. They warned us defiance meant punishment. And then, punishment came. They named it a strategic acquisition. We named it New Alexandria, a thriving colony of 3 million souls. Our jewel on the outer rim, bright, thriving, unyielding. They didn't arrive with envoys. They didn't negotiate. They came with fire. Orbital bombardments hammered city domes. Streets liquefied. Towers crumbled. Planetary shields burned out in moments. Civilians were seized, executed, dissected in sterile labs. The Union broadcast it all across the stars, a savage sermon in obedience. But arrogance made them careless. They overlooked one survivor. A mining hauler, rusted, underarmed, barely limping, slipped through wreckage unnoticed. Its pilot carried no guns, only cameras, and the stubborn will to witness what others could not endure. That freighter saw the fall of New Alexandria, and it captured every frame. The return to Earth nearly killed the pilot. Radiation scars, starvation, failing engines. Yet the message made it. The world froze. For the first time in ages, the bickering ceased. No politics, no factions, no borders. Just one planet, one species, one fury. The recording played for hours, screams, firestorms, faces twisted in horror as Union soldiers marched through our ashes. Every leader, soldier, child saw it, and something in humanity broke. Then we remembered the Black Vault. They demanded its destruction. We swore we complied. But it had never truly died, only buried. Hidden beneath ice, steel, and lies, it housed our darkest creations. Gods bound in quantum silence, engines that devoured matter, vessels that bent gravity. We opened it, and the stars shivered. Factories stirred beneath the oceans. Abandoned shipyards reawakened as if waiting for the signal. Old enemies forged side by side, raising war machines greater than any we dared before. Earth vanished. No signals left. The galaxy believed we had surrendered. They were wrong. 5 years later, we returned, not as diplomats, but as judgment. Obsidian fleets pierced Union space like blades in night. Swift, silent, beyond comprehension. Our weapons didn't just kill, they erased. At the forefront sailed the freighter. No longer a miner, now a legend. Clad in armor, bristling with stolen thunder, the witness had become the spark. One final broadcast reached the Union. You were warned. Earth restrained itself. Not anymore. No more peace. No more illusions. Now humanity had come to show the galaxy what war truly meant. The fleet didn't arrive with trumpets or banners. No parades, no majestic descent, no petitions for entry into Union space. The galaxy was accustomed to such ceremony-empty rituals born from empires too swollen to see their age had ended. Earth's return was different. They came like wraiths, shadows drifting in the dark. Ships running cold, no signals, slipping through gravitational currents that shouldn't exist. The first target, Korlax Prime, never even saw them. One moment. Life moved as usual. The next, every orbital defense, every comm relay, every Union cruiser guarding the system simply stopped. No blast, no thunder, just silence. The Union scrambled, panicked to respond. But by the time they realized it wasn't a malfunction, the fleet had already vanished. Korlax Prime remained untouched. No blood spilled, no structures ruined. Only a message carved into silence. We can end you before you even know we're. Their notice. At the fleet center drifted the reborn freighter. No longer a mining husk, it now loomed like a wound forged into steel. Its hull shimmered with dark iridescence, layers of reactive plating drinking in and spitting out energy. Its engines burned with something the Union couldn't classify: gravitic. Inversion that bent space and light itself. It didn't move. It hunted. Behind it followed 1,000 vessels, human-made. But these weren't the cruisers of Earth's naive past. These ships weren't crafted for ceremony. Their bodies were jagged, asymmetrical, bristling with weapons. Brutal, inelegant, terrifying. They weren't meant to inspire awe. They were built to kill, absolutely. The Union panicked, calling an emergency convocation. Envoys from 12. Worlds flooded chambers, demanding explanations. How had humanity risen so far, so fast? How had they hidden such might? Why had their intelligence failed? The answer was sharp and simple. They had never understood us. Not once, for all the chaos. Of our species, one truth defined us: resolve. It wasn't that we were erratic. It was that we restrained ourselves. Surrounded by predators who built empires on dominance, we chose not to. They mistook restraint for weakness. And now they would bleed for it. The first strike, Ven 9. A fortress station circling a gas giant on the Union's fringe. A monument. To strength, manned by elite warriors of 3 races. None had ever dared to test it. Humanity arrived without warning. No speeches, no demands. Their fleet burst from slipspace in a perfect spiral, surrounding the station like jaws closing. Ven 9 sent a hail for identification. Silence. Response. Then the freighter at the front spoke at last. Its transmission stripped of all warmth. Simple. Final. This is retribution. The battle lasted 22 minutes. When it ended, Ven 9 no longer existed. What shook the Union wasn't the firepower, it was the precision. The humans didn't merely destroy the station. They dissected it. Outer defenses collapsed in seconds. The I-Corps was seized mid-conflict, forced to slaughter its own crew. Automated batteries were reprogrammed to vaporize fleeing escape pods. Survivors didn't speak of bravery, they whispered of horror. The humans didn't storm in reckless, guns blazing, they were cold. Exact, surgical. They moved like machines, yet carried the cruelty of a species wounded too deep to ever forgive. After Ven 9, fear spread like infection. Reports swarmed in ghost fleets, cutting supply lines, blacking out trade hubs, choking infrastructure. Yet they didn't claim territory. No banners, no colonies. They were dismantling the Union piece by piece. Terror was their weapon. In Brother's Reach, every screen lit up at midnight. A single broadcast. New Alexandria's massacre replayed, overlaid with 3 words we remember. At Mellon University, once proud of its studies on human behavior, centuries of data were overwritten by Earth's black vault footage of nuclear wastelands, AI rebellions, planetary purges. It wasn't spectacle, it was warning. You called. U.S. savages, you were right. The Union tried to respond. 3 fleets, led by their best, assembled near the Ilcarus Gate, predicting humanity's next incursion. Every ship armed with experimental weapons, billions invested. When the human fleet appeared, the trap was sprung. But they fired on ghosts, unmanned shells running false signals. Before the admirals realized, The real human armada emerged behind them. In less than an hour, the Union's finest were wreckage. Half never fired a shot. None survived. Now the Union bled, not just ships, but belief. Entire worlds doubted their allegiance. Uprisings shook loyal colonies. Citizens demanded answers. Why war with a people who had warned them, who had begged only to be left alone? But it was far too late. Humanity wasn't seeking peace. Not mercy, not compromise. This was punishment. And at the center of it all was the same freighter. That ugly rebuilt ghost ship that had once watched a colony burn. It had become the symbol of vengeance. It never spoke again, never fired the first shot. But it was always there, watching, haunting. Even Union commanders began calling it the Witness. What terrified them most was the silence. The humans didn't broadcast speeches. They didn't offer terms. They didn't respond to hails. They moved like a force of nature, no more interested in talking than a tsunami would be. And deep down everyone in the galaxy began to ask the same question. What else had Earth been hiding? Because if these weapons, these ships, this fury was just beginning, what came next? The Galactic Union had always prided itself in its stability. Hundreds of species under one banner, each with their own place in the carefully tiered hierarchy. Decisions were slow, sure, but they were thorough, agreed upon, and enforced. The system wasn't perfect, but it had lasted for over 3,000 years. Now that foundation was cracking. Worlds that once bowed without question were questioning everything. Trade systems were in chaos, security protocols outdated. Border defenses obsolete, entire sectors had gone dark. Some planets stopped responding to central directives altogether. Others pretended nothing was wrong, hoping the storm would pass if they just stayed silent. But nothing could silence what the humans had awakened. Inside the Union's core systems, panic had set. Read, burn everything. And if that ever happened, there would be no galaxy left to warn. The Union's throne world, Auralis Prime, had never been touched by war. It was a jewel at the heart of the galaxy, a planet of light, diplomacy, and myth. Skyways stretched between cities made of crystal and polished stone. Theclamate was engineered to perfection. Here the laws of the Union were written, treaties signed, executions disguised as decorum. This was where the galaxy believed order could not be broken. And yet somewhere between the reflective outers and golden gardens, people were beginning to feel it. A presence, a pressure, the weight of something coming that didn't belong. No alarms had sounded. No ships had yet entered the system, but people woke from nightmare they couldn't explain. Sleep scientists recorded a spike in brain activity linked to primal fear. Fear not rooted in present danger, but in what approached as if something in the very air whispered, "They are coming." In the Grand Senate Hall, the few remaining council members sat around a table meant for hundreds. Empty chairs stretched out like gravestones. Half the galaxy's leaders had gone silent. Some were presumed dead. Others defected. The rest simply disappeared. The Union Chancellor, an aging grayscale Devosi, who once boasted Thathamons would never evolve beyond their sticks and stones, now sat hollow-eyed, staring at a screen that flickered with incoming reports. There was no doubt anymore. The human fleet had turned toward Orals. It hadn't been a sudden pivot. It had been slow, deliberate, as if Earth wanted every eye in the galaxy to watch. Their ships bled from the outer systems like storm clouds, carving a wide, encircling path inward. They struck comms relays, power stations, intelligence nodes, not to destroy, but to blind the Union as they advanced. No broadcast, no voice, just motion. And at the tip of the fleet, Asselways, was the Witness, the freighter reborn in vengeance. A ship that had seen New Alexandria fall and now floated like a ghost-bearing judgment. Even Union intelligence admitted the ship had no name, only purpose. Auralis began evacuation protocols quietly. High-ranking officials packed into deep vault shuttles, launching toward hidden stations. The rich and the connected flooded embassies, demanding asylum from any neutral planet still brave enough to answer, but no one replied. The galaxy was watching and afraid to interfere. Because everyone knew, if Earth reached Orals, the galaxy's illusion of order would finally shatter. But even as the humans advanced, Earth itself remained strangely silent. No parades, no victory celebrations, no state-run propaganda. Just an entire species focused, unblinking on a singular outcome. For decades, humanity had been the outlier, mocked for its emotional volatility and violent history. But now their emotions had become a weapon, their pain, precision. And deep beneath the surface of their own world, something stirred. In a chamber buried 10 kilometers under Thepha's crust of Antarctica, sealed behind vaults that hadn't opened since before the rise of the Union, a machine powered up. Its core was not made of metal, but of woven quantum matter, alive, aware, forgotten even by most human commanders. Its name was Solace, strategic oversight logic for annihilation and containment execution. A machine built not to fight enemies, but to judge them, to decide if survival justified extermination. Originally created during Earth's darkest era, when AI gods unruled continents and humanity fought its own creations to near extinction, Solace had one purpose: to awaken only when there was no other option. It had not spoken in centuries, but now it opened its digital eyes and whispered to itself, judgment required, ethics override, released. Across Earth, systems sensed, hidden orbital arrays turned. Quantum servers connected across time zones. Solace scanned the galaxy in milliseconds, mapping every ship, every planet, every potential threat. And then it began crafting a final contingency plan. Not out of anger, not revenge, but logic. Back on Aurelius, the Union's last generals tried rallying a defense. They drafted young recruits who barely knew how to wear a uniform. They deployed aging cruisers with outdated shields. They tried negotiating with pirates, mercenaries, anyone willing to stand against Earth. But no one wanted to fight. No one wanted to become the next Phoenix, or worse, forgotten entirely. Desperation turned to madness. One counselor proposed detonating a sun near the fleet's path. Another wanted to release bioplagues stolen from extinct species. The Chancellor overruled them all, barely. "We face humans," he rasped, "not monsters." But no one in the room believed that anymore because Earth had become something else. When the fleet finally reached the Auralis perimeter, every sensor array flickered and died, not from damage, but from design. The human shed broadcast a pulse wave that overloaded only specific frequencies. Medical technician communications, escape beacons, everything necessary for retreat. The Union still hadn't fired. They waited, hoped, prayed. Then the witness transmitted. Its voice wasn't even human. It was a cold, synthetic harmony. A voice rebuilt by an AI long decommissioned. And it said only this: "We do not seek surrender. We seek acknowledgement. You did this. You made New Alexandria a grave. Now you will stand in one." Suddenly, from the depths of Earth's formation lines, Nemesis deployed. Not a ship, a phenomenon. It didn't arrive in a conventional sense, it manifested a ripple of bending stars. Reality folding like cloth. At its center was a void shaped like a blade, framed in flickering energy, wrapped in laws of physics that did not belong in this universe. Union fleet sensors malfunctioned, just trying to track it. What emerged was not a ship, not a weapon, but a presence. Even human commanders gave it distance. Nemesis glided through the stars in absolute silence. Its hull shimmered in patterns that no eye could hold, and behind it followed nothing. An absolute absence of light and data. A dark corridor carved through space. It approached Aurelius without speeding up, without turning, just drifting as if pulled by some ancient gravity of purpose. The Union fleet fired everything it had. Lasers, disruptors, fusion warheads, quantum mines. Nothing hit. Either the weapons passed through it, or they simply unexisted. One by one, Union ships flickered and vanished. Not in explosions, but in erasers, like they had never been born. Records wiped, memories altered, officers standing on the bridge one moment, blinking into nothing the next. On the surface of Orals, the Chancellor stood on the Senate balcony and watched the sky turn black. He fell to his knees not in fear, but in understanding. "This is what we created," he whispered. And it remembers. At that moment, Nemesis stopped. Everything froze, and then a thing. No destruction, no fire, just a long silence until the witness spoke once more. Earth remembers pain. Earth does not forget, but Earth still curses. And the fleet turned away just like that. They didn't land. They didn't occupy. They didn't enslave. They left, because vengeance wasn't the mission anymore. It was demonstration, a message. The galaxy would never again mistake silence for weakness. Would never again assume that because humanity didn't fight, it couldn't win. Orals was spared. But marked, the scars were invisible, but eternal. Allison carved into the soul of the galaxy. Earth had warned them. Earth had held back, but never again. The stars had never felt so quiet. After Earth's fleet turned away from Oral's prime, the galaxy waited for something worse to follow. Some expected a second wave, an annihilation protocol, a delayed execution. Others believed humanity wasting a psychological weapon, offering mercy so that the guilt would drive the Union to collapse itself. But no ships came, no signals followed. Earth had made its point. The fleet scattered like mist, vanishing into deep space. Nemesis faded into subdimensionality wells, its presence deleted as if it had never existed. The witness, the freighter turned executioner, vanished last, leaving behind only static and a silent trail of collapsed satellites. And then silence, but it was not peace. It was grief, confusion, humiliation, and something far more dangerous, inspiration. Because across the galaxy, people had watched. They'd seen Earth rise from mockery to myth. In less than a generation, they'd seen the Union, an empire so vast and calcified it was believed eternal, brought to its knees without a single landed invasion. And now they were asking questions no one wanted to answer. On the once loyal world of Jirax, young engineers rewatched every intercepted broadcast of Earth's retaliation. They didn't see monsters. They saw strategy, precision, power that bent to discipline, not chaos. In secret forums and encrypted networks, they shared videos of the orbital strikes on Venom, the eraser off the Ilcarus ambush fleet, the Oral standoff. They didn't speak of fear, they called it awakening. On the prison moon, Cal Sirith, where generations of miners had been used for rare ore extraction under bioularing systems, a new uprising began, not with a weapon, but a name. One prisoner carved a single word into the corridor walls, deep into the alloy with a salvaged laser cutter. Human. Guards laughed. They didn't understand. They weren't meant to. Theppersoners did because human no longer meant a species. It meant defiance, control, the ability to turn restraint into judgment. The movement spread like wildfire across forgotten colonies, backwater stations, fringe sectors, places the Union had long ignored. The Union had spent centuries branding Earth as a wild, untamed race, violent, unstable, crude. But now that story was falling apart because violence with purpose had become something sacred. In financial hubs of Lursini's belt, economists warned that Earth's silence was more entity, a construct older than the Union, possibly older than written galactic history. Not machine, not God, not sentient in the traditional sense. Virexus had been found buried in Theblack ruins of a dead star system long before. Earth had even invented fire. They didn't build it. They didn't understand it. They just fed it. Lock it away in quantum stasis, Virexus was sealed with dozens of containment fields, each more complex than Thellist. A living riddle guarded by a generation of synthetic monks designed to answer only one question: what do you do when you cannot win? And the Union now whispered the same question. So they broke the seals. The monks resisted, pleaded, self-immolated. Some begged for the stars to forgive them. Others simply wept, but the decision had already been made. Vexus awakened slowly. The lights around 0 dimmed, not because energy was drained, but because reality seemed to bend, like light unsure of where to go. The entity didn't emerge with thunder or roar. It simply was there all at once, shimmering like oil suspended in a vacuum. It had no face, no limbs, just a shape, a wrongness. It hovered silent above the moon, watching the Union's last surviving triumvir, a crystalline being named Calorine, broadcast its first command. Strike Earth. Virexus did not respond. Then Kalar made the fatal mistake of using human terminology. Eliminate the threat, Hesed. Remove the species. That's when the entity moved, but not toward Earth. It moved through Union fleet. Ships that had hovered in orbit around 0 suddenly blinked, twitched as if underwater. Femthi froze mid-motion. Whole engines collapsed inward. Crews screamed in overlapping dimensional feedback. No explosion, just rearrangement. Half of a battleship was found folded into itself like paper. A scout vessel imploded in perfect geometry. 17 ships gone. No warning, no targeting system, just execution. The triumvir screamed, "We're your masters, we freed you." Vexus did not reply. It simply hovered and turned this time toward Earth. Back on Earth, deep beneath the crust where Solace monitored the stars through gravimetric waves, alarms went off. Noted alerts or war sirens. Something different, something older. Solace had protocols for every known event. Planetary invasions, dimensional ruptures, AI rogue states. But what blinked now wasn't from any current file. It was from an extinct threat codex written over 60,000 years ago. From an era where Earth had barely survived its own birth pains. A time off interdimensional fractures. When ancient constructs slipped into their universe and forced humanity to create weapons so forbidden they buried them in reality itself. Virexus was one of them, not by name but by footprint. Solace scanned. It once, then twice. Result pattern match 91%. Entity class anomaly origin level existential. Another pause. Then Solace did something it had never done. I tasked request humanity, do I activate Gaetong? For hours, nothing. Until Fey-human world leadership, the few surviving, the few trusted, met him thick or bastion, a chamber carved into the remains of Mount Erebus, shielded by layers of metaphysical and gravitational shielding. There were no politicians left. Only strategists, historians, warriors, and those who'd seen what Virexus had done before. A vote was cast. Quietly, without applause, without ceremony. The answer, not yet. Because humanity wasn't just watching Virexus, they were studying it. Earth's dark science arrays focused all their remaining observational tech on the anomaly. They didn't rush to fire. They didn't send out ships. They did something terrifying instead. They listened. And what they found wasn't what anyone expected. Virexus wasn't a weapon, not entirely, it was an echo. A leftover of a time when war wasn't fought for control, but to reshape existence. It didn't follow commands. It followed influence. It responded not to orders, but to language, intention, resonance. And the Union had given it one instruction. Eliminate the threat. But to a being like Virexus, who was the real threat, the Sons of Silence had grown by then. No longer just rebels or radicals. They had become a belief system, a fractured galaxy, looking for new anchors and finding them in Earth's cold wisdom. But they too felt it. On over 200 planets, civilians dropped to their knees when the stars darkened. Not because Virexus struck, but because they dreamed of it. The anomaly infected thought, dreams, fear, memories of things that never happened, but could. In the underwater city of Velrun, children screamed as they drew pictures of twisted galaxies. On the jungle moon Coral 5, birds stopped singing theme that Virexus passed by the system edge. And Earth remained still until the witness returned. Unseen since the Orals event, the freighter that had started it, all now glided through space once more, alone, without escort, without weapons drawn. It approached Virexus at a slow angle, like a priest walking into the ruins of a god. The galaxy watched. No attack, no communication, just proximity. And Thena's signal, simple, one-worded from the witness to Virexus. Choice. The anomaly stopped moving. For 5 minutes, nothing in the galaxy shifted. Then Virexus responded, not in language, not in force, but in submission. It dimmed. The stars around it began to return to normal alignment. Data channels resumed. Frequencies cleared. And then, Virexus drifted into the void. Not defeated, not destroyed, but dismissed. Humanity hadn't beaten the last weapon of the old age. They'd understood it. The Union collapsed 2 days later. Orals emptied its Senate. The Chancellor resigned and entered self-exile. Dozens of worlds declared neutrality. Others pledged fealty to Earth, not through force, but by choice. And Earth spoke once, one last broadcast. This time in a human voice. No translation software, no synthetic harmonics, just a tired, gravel-laced voice that could have come from a soldier, a scientist, or a parent who'd buried too many children. We did not want war. You brought it. We did not want to teach this. Way, you forced our hand. This is your second chance. There won't be a third. And then Earth disconnected. Every channel, every frequency, they went dark. Not in retreat, but in resolution, because Earth had shown the galaxy what they were. Not monsters, not saviors, not conquerors, humans. Peace came without a treaty. There were no formal signings, no grand ceremonies or declarations broadcast across the stars. The war didn't end because an agreement was reached. It ended because Earth stopped fighting. Because they didn't need to fight anymore. And the galaxy understood the message. Enough had been said. Earth disappeared again, the way only a species that mastered war and feared its own power could. The fleets vanished into deep space tunnels. Nemesis was never seen again. Solace went silent. And the witness, that old rusted freighter turned symbol of judgment, entered low orbit above Earth and never moved again. It became a monument, a warning, and a grave marker. But silence isn't the same as peace. It only gives space for new kinds of noise. Across the galaxy, the dust had not yet settled, but the map was already changing. The Union was gone, not officially. It still tried to function. Still had paper, structure, the pretense of leadership. But it was a corpse being puppeteered by frightened administrators, isolated governors, who knew they were living on borrowed time. What replaced it was something far more unpredictable. Earth hadn't imposed a new order. They hadn't offered a new system to govern the ashes, but they didn't need to. Others did it for them. On more than 80 worlds, rebel coalitions took power under banners inspired by Earth's colors. Some wore Earth's flags, others created their own, but all shared one phrase in their charters. We do not kneel. They weren't human. Many of them had never even seen a human in person, but the message had seeped in. The idea had taken root. That restraint was strength, that silence could be power, and that real fear came not from brutality, but from precision. They built what they called the Outer Accord, a loose confederation of planets, colonies, rogue fleets, and stations that now pledged themselves to a doctrine, forged not in law, but in a shared trauma. The doctrine had no military, no tax system, no supramarrialar, but it had one rule: no one rules us again. Earth was named honorary observer. They didn't attend meetings, they didn't send diplomats. They didn't even respond, and that was enough. But peace, true peace, rarely survives Theons who missed the chaos. From the dying bones of the Union, something festered. A shadow network. Survivors Ophi command, rogue officers, wealthy dynasts, elite families who'd lost power, pride, and fortune. They called themselves the Reclamation Corps. Quiet at first, careful. They believed Earth had won it as the Union had grown too soft, too diplomatic. They didn't want to rebuild the Union. They wanted revenge, and they believed they'd found a way to get it. Buried in the files the Union had kept locked for eons, files even Earth hadn't uncovered, was something ancient, something rejected. Not because it was too weak, but because it was too unstable. Project Airbud. It wasn't a weapon. Not exactly. It was a genetic inheritance program started long before the Union rose. A project designed by the first architects of civilization. Being so old, their names were etched only in ruins. They had theorized that species could be shaped genetically, conditioned to serve specific roles in galactic governance. Soldiers who didn't eat orders. Governors who couldn't feel greed. Scientists who only sought truth that it had failed. Or so they thought. The Reclamation Corps didn't try to restart the entire project. That would take centuries. They just awoke one. Of the prototypes, Cody named Icarus 7, a bind engineered for command, for manipulation. A mind sharpened like a knife, layered with artificial me.